East Foster Street, in the city of Melrose, Massachusetts, stands a small, plain-looking building. You might not even notice it as you walk by. But it's not just any building. It's a house of worship, a place where the Jews of Melrose and surrounding communities join together as one. A place where Jews share their faith, learn Hebrew, and study the Torah. It's also a family place, a community where temple members get involved in each other's lives, share their joys and sorrows, and support each other during times of need. It's a place to pray, to break bread together, celebrate festivals, and dissect global events from a Jewish point of view. But the story of this place, Temple Beth Shalom, dates back many years. It's a story best told by its members, some of whom recall the temple's beginnings nearly 70 years ago.
The very first meeting we had at our house, and we had the gefilte fish supper at our house. We were approached or spoken to by two of the ladies in Melrose who seemed to think that there were enough Jewish people to start some kind of a little organization.
The earliest incarnation of the temple was as the Melrose Jewish Community Center, more a social organization than a place of worship. Natalie Dilyuk's family was among the founding members in 1940.
But it had nothing to do with religion or temples or anything like that. However, Dorothy Diamond and Gertrude Young definitely spoke about starting an organization. And so we had the first meeting at my house at 24 Cleveland Street.
And from that little beginning, I don't know how many, but maybe 12, 15 people. And there may be other versions of this, but I think I'm reasonably accurate. And from that, they formed a community center.
Dorothy Diamond became our very first president, and then a few years later, she became president again.
At first, families would gather in each other's homes.
People were very generous with their homes, and we'd have committee meetings or regular meetings in people's houses.
Later, the Melrose Jewish Community Center found its first real home at 34 Crystal Street. A park now occupies the spot where the Jewish Community Center rented a bungalow from the American Legion.
We used to meet there and have parties there and high holiday services.
For Shabbat and holidays, a rabbinical student from New York or elsewhere would drive up to Melrose and spend the weekend with the temple family.
Mostly my mother-in-law's house. In the beginning, though, they would get somebody that was kosher usually, and so that my mother-in-law's house was kosher, so they would stay there.
In 1944, the Melrose Jewish Community Center's Articles of Incorporation were approved by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. With the end of World War II, the husbands and sons of Jewish families began returning home to Melrose. These families wanted a place of their own to gather as a community and to raise their children in the Jewish tradition.
After World War II, a lot of the veterans came home, and some of them settled in Melrose, which was unusual because there was not a large Jewish population in Melrose at that time.
I was sitting on the front steps of my house right after we moved in, and a member of the temple, Joe Dilyuk, knew that Jewish people had moved in. And he approached me and introduced himself and told us about the temple.
I was not even aware if there was a temple in Melrose, but I made an inquiry or two, and the next thing I know, people came down to my house with a bottle of wine, embraced me, invited me down, and I came down to this building for the first time, and I was a young man, and I never left. I'm still here. I'm still here.
A few of the girls, including Doreen, Debbie, and a couple of others, approached my home and brought some, I don't remember, holly or some such thing, to welcome me to the community center at that time.
Roots began to take hold in the late 40s and 50s, and the members of the center were ready to form a full-fledged synagogue. In September 1955, the board of directors approved the purchase of a building at 21 East Foster Street. Its name was Oak Manor.
Most people know it was reputed to be a dance hall.
Someone else said, "Do you believe I used to come to dancing classes here?" Because it used to Oak Manor, and it was a dancing place where they used to come and dance.
It had a stage. It had a movie projection area where they would show movies. It had a place for food and bar service. And it needed to be converted to a temple.
Through the 50s and early 60s, members devoted their brains, sweat, and brawn to transform the former dance hall into a house of worship.
We carried boxes. I remember packing up all the stuff and moving in. Everybody was so excited because it was our building, not something we were renting.
And there were still probably a few things up in the attic that were packed and never opened. They have to be thrown out now.
My dad went home and built a scale model with little doors that folded, with real little curtains. He brought it into a meeting for the congregation to see. And once they saw what the scale model looked like and said, "Oh, that's a great idea," they built it. And they had, I guess, a contractor came in and built it. My grandmother did the sewing. On the inside, that's all the white fabric is what my grandmother sewed for the inside. And then the eternal light was a little wine cup that was created, that was made into a light from an antique dealer. My dad went out and found this little wine cup, and they created that.
Services were now being held on a regular basis at 21 East Foster Street. In 1963, the Jewish Community Center of Melrose voted to join the Union of American Hebrew Congregations and the Reformed Jewish Community.
We had to decide what kind of a temple we wanted to be. And we invited people to come in and talk to us. And Rabbi Schindler, Alexander Schindler, came in and he spoke to us. And I think he could have sold us anything. I think he could have sold us a bridge. I mean, he was such a convincing orator. And we decided we would join the Reform movement.
A year later, a new name was chosen, Temple Beth Shalom, House of Peace. Today, nearly all of the founding members are gone, but the signs of their devotion to building the temple are still visible, and they are honored on memorial plaques and other items around the temple.
As you walk into the temple, there is a large plaque on the wall, and that is the Bertha Dillock Memorial Plaque. When my mother passed away, we put that plaque up, and that's where all the names, if a person passes away, they put the name on that plaque.
At holiday and Sabbath services throughout the year, their names and memories are evoked aloud during the recital of the mourner's Kaddish. The fabric of the young Temple Beth Shalom was woven from a blend of religious, cultural, and social experiences.
We did shows and we did group vacations.
Oh, we went up to the Catskills.
We went up to the Catskills 14 years in a row. Fabulous. We had the best time.
Catskills was in its prime at that time.
I love the barbecue. I love being the first, after a summer of not seeing everyone, getting together just on a purely social level and just talking and seeing everybody again.
And occasionally the congregation gathered to showcase its members' talents.
What ain't we got? We ain't got names.
They were silly scripts, you know what I mean? Because it was a show. The men would put on wigs, or some kind, make hair out of something, and put on some foolish thing, And then if anybody had a talent, naturally, they would sing or this or that.
I used to have a voice. I used to be able to sing. And at one point, I even played the accordion and sang. but Doreen wrote a lot of the scripts that we used, and she was very talented and very good.
I was the writer of most of the shows, and I played the piano for most of the shows.
The shows were absolutely hilarious.
The men were in Hawaiian outfits. Wasn't that taken from the concept, that movie that came
South
out,
Pacific.
South Pacific? And we were trying to enact.
Like a dame.
And we were trying to act that out with the men being the women dancing with the Hawaiian skirt.
We get packages from home, we get movies, we get shows, we get speeches from our skipper, and advice from Tokyo Road.
From its earliest days, this building on East Foster Street has resonated with music. In the days of Oak Manor, when Melrosians came here to unwind after a week's work, the sounds were swing and hot jazz. These days, it's the chanting of prayers and hymns of faith that fill the hall. But the spirit of performance here is still very much alive. The current generation of Temple members includes a talented group of musicians, several on the faculty of Boston's esteemed Berklee College of Music. Since the mid-1990s, Temple Beth Shalom has hosted jazz concerts each year in the spring and fall. It's a way of connecting with the building's past, as well as with the larger community.
A nice old nightmare, darn that dream, but bless it too. For without that dream, I'll never.
It's one of the best audiences. They're extremely supportive, attentive. It's the ideal audience. They love the music. They come here. They're huge fans of the music. And so you just feel it right away, the energy of they really want to hear us, you know.
It's great to be, to be a member of the temple and then to be able to play here too is great.
It feels like this place is known for its jazz. People come from all around.
Oh yeah, it's definitely established itself as a jazz venue.
So to speak?
So to speak, and too bad that we can't do it weekly.
Temple Beth Shalom has had a succession of rabbis over the years, especially early on, when the tiny synagogue had trouble attracting and keeping more established religious leaders. Some of these early rabbis became well known in the greater Jewish community and went on to wider acclaim in other areas.
One of them was Larry Kushner, who has written about 25 books on Kabbalah. He was the rabbi in my bar mitzvah, one of my daughters.
Rabbi Schindler, who was the head of the Reform movement in New England, would come out on Friday nights, and he was a gem. He later became head of the National Reform movement.
When we first were married, we started with Rabbi Jay, who had a magnificent singing voice. And then there was Fred Greenspan in the early 70s, a very nice fella. Then there was Michael Greenwald.
Rabbi Cohen. Let's see, after Phil Cohen.
Ben Radofsky.
Jeffrey Faust.
Jeff Faust. Followed by
Rabbi Fertig.
Yeah.
Arnold Fertig has been the spiritual leader of Temple Beth Shalom since 1998. He says this tiny synagogue and its members are truly special.
There's a tremendous amount of responsibility that's taken on by each member voluntarily, and there's a lot of pride in the congregation, I think, that people feel. There's activity at all different levels in the services and the fundraising and the sisterhood, the religious school, and the jazz nights, the various other things that the congregation does on a regular basis. And we tend, therefore, to take a special pride and ownership of all that we do and really value our community and build our community by all the actions that we do together.
Rabbi Fertig is a member of the Melrose Clergy Association and is involved in many of the city's interfaith activities. Temple Beth Shalom has a long history of bringing together people of various faiths.
At the beginning, it was like discovering each other, and it was very good. Among the churches here, there is a good deal of good interfaith feeling. We participate every year, I know our rabbi does, in the interfaith event that's on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
I remember the interfaith service for years and years and years. And in the beginning, it was always held in this temple. And it outgrew it because so many people came, but it was always so beautiful to come and share with the churches and the congregations and just be one people, not religions, but one people.
And all the ladies of the temple had baked, and the people who had come to the interfaith service were overwhelmed by the variety and the quality of the baked goods that they were being presented with. And so we held, but after a while that service, the temple outgrew the service. We couldn't accommodate the people.
We sort of outgrew the temple setting, and therefore we've had to go to a larger sanctuary. But that service is always very well attended, and Rabbi Fertig is always a big part of the clergy participating.
As a continuing part of that outreach, volunteers from Temple Beth Shalom have prepared and hosted a Christmas dinner at the First Baptist Church every year since 1988.
We serve between 50 and 100 people, and they get a full meal. They get turkey and cranberry and potatoes and stuffing and vegetables and other things to drink and nibble on.
Just being here with friends and helping serve people, I think it's just a great feeling.
Anytime you can bring Christian and Jewish people together is a wonderful thing. And for the temple to do this is making a significant difference in people's lives.
And our congregation is involved in many other community activities.
We have Home for the Holidays, and that has made such a big difference in the city of Melrose. The first time they came in, people said to me, "I have never been in here. I've always wondered what it was like inside."
We're not a little clique of a Jewish group of people, so, with a fence around us. This is an open temple, and Melrose is an open town.
Each year, temple members sing the South African national anthem at the annual celebration for Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
I actually believe that religious communities of all kinds are actually our world's last best hope to spread a message of love in a world that needs to hear that so very, very, very much.
The more you can bring people together to learn, to discuss, and to share a meal, or to have a good time, those are bonds that are never forgotten. And that's why Melrose is so special, because we've been able to do that and get people together. The more you bring people together in the long run, the better you're going to be as a community.
Our goal is to help our students feel very good about being Jewish. We want them to feel comfortable. We want them to know what it means to be a Jewish American citizen.
Temple Beth Shalom has one of the best religious schools on the North Shore. But this was not always so. In fact, through much of the temple's early history, there were not enough students to sustain a Hebrew school.
We only had about 5 to 8 students for the whole Hebrew class. That was it. There were different ages and different sexes, there were boys and girls, and they were all taught by the same teacher. It was pretty much at the same time.
After a while, the religious school simply faded away. The few families with children gave them private instruction or sent them to Hebrew schools elsewhere. But in the mid-1980s, more young Jewish families moved into the Melrose area, and like an earlier generation, these families wanted to raise their kids in the Jewish faith.
When my husband and I first stepped foot in the temple, we were really the first of a new generation of young families that came in. I wanted my kids to have a good sense of Jewish community here in Melrose. This was their city, this was where they went to school, and they should have a Jewish identity here. In 1989 we had our first, the 88-89 class. We had a preschool program, which I taught. There were 5 preschool sessions, and of course there was no cost because it was a volunteer for the teachers.
Such was the beginning of the Shalom School. Later, as students got older, upper grade classes were added and teachers were hired. Word began to spread of the high quality of education provided at Temple Beth Shalom, and enrollment increased. Soon it became clear that more space was needed to accommodate the influx of new students. And in 1996, Temple members, under the direction of then-President Glenn Emmerloch, picked up saws, hammers, and sheetrock and built an annex, providing the school with a library and several new classrooms.
Everything on the interior was done by the members. So the walls, the doors, the blackboard, the painting, the framing of the windows, the tile floor. We had people from all walks of life, doctors, nurses, lawyers, social workers. I was able to get them to successfully do carpentry, painting, spackling. They may not have repeated the process, but they at least did it once. The framing was done by a professional contractor, so all the parents, you can rest assured the building's not falling down anytime soon.
Upon completion of the new annex, the Hebrew school became a magnet for even more young families, and it energized the temple as a whole.
Some of our oldest members, you know, when they saw kids at services or kids at special programs, I mean, their eyes lit up. I mean, there was life that was coming back to the temple.
Andrea Cates became principal of the Shalom School in 2006. With more than 20 years' experience in Jewish education, Cates has instituted a well-rounded curriculum, including units on religious customs, holidays, and Jewish history.
In terms of being on the cutting edge, state-of-the-art materials, creativity, and I think we have a really wonderful curriculum, wonderful teaching materials. I'm always looking for ways to enrich the curriculum through multi-intelligence types of programming, where the kids can move around, they can have music, food, arts and crafts. There are so many different ways that we educate our students.
There's this flexibility to bring Judaism into the community in a way that we feel meets the needs of the students.
Wendy Yaakov began teaching at the Shalom School in 1993.
I see the continuation of the kids and how the kids become more confident in their Judaism and just feel proud to be Jewish. And I have to say, within the temple, I've seen a much stronger commitment as they get older to continue on. I've actually seen some of the kids as little babies, then also as B'nai Mitzvahs, which is very exciting.
Jewish education at the Shalom School is a shared responsibility. In addition to the fine teaching staff, the rabbi also was involved in religious instruction.
Abraham is the father of the Jews. All of us trace ourselves back to Abraham.
You mean Abraham Lincoln?
No, not Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was named after our Abraham. And this Abraham didn't even have a last name. He was just Abraham.
And parents, too, play a role in educating their children.
I'm thrilled with the fact that it's blossomed and that, you know, that kids have a sense of community here, because that's really what it was meant to be, that there's a Jewish presence and kids feel connected right here in Melrose.
The temple has an active sisterhood that meets at least once a month.
We kind of wanted to bring all the people, all the women together, whether they're from the community or from the temple, a group of women that want to do things together, that they like to be together. We have the book group, we have the knitting group, we have the mahjong group. So people of different interests are finding that they can find something within the sisterhood that they enjoy.
Its members are involved in many activities, including a book club and outreach to other temple members who are ill or in need of comfort.
From the beginning, the goal was to knit individual squares that would be put together ultimately into a blanket. We call them Mishabara blankets that we have available to give when someone in the temple is ill, has any kind of medical, maybe emotional problem, needs the comfort of a blanket. We feel that the blankets contain the sort of the elemental feeling of all the people that are working on them, and there could be 10, 12 different hands that have gone into knitting one Mishabara blanket.
Like so much else at Temple Beth Shalom, the sisterhood has seen a resurgence in recent years.
I think until you're in a sisterhood sort of situation, you don't really realize how important it is for women to get together, to know each other better, support each other.
A family's leaving the temple, and they were leaving because they didn't feel connected. And so Dorothy Travis and I and Ruthie were talking about that, and we said, well, maybe if we connect the women. There's a connection with women, and once women get connected, they want to stay, and they feel like they belong. So we wanted to do that and make it open to everyone, and make it with anybody's idea. Anybody could come up with an idea. So we meet once in the beginning of the year, and everybody throws out ideas of what they want to do. I love the women that belong to our temple.
This floor is so sunk that when you try to close the cabinet doors, they just open by themselves.
With all that goes on at Temple Beth Shalom, our little building is showing signs of wear and tear. In the fall of 2006, the temple began a capital campaign aimed at raising $1 million for much-needed repairs and renovation of our aging building. The congregation has contributed generously to this effort. As head of the design committee, Dorothy Travis has spearheaded the effort to renovate the temple.
It's been at times a very exhausting process, at times exhilarating. I think it's made us get closer as a congregation. I think the people that have pulled together for this, I think it's been something that's really made us even closer as a temple.
Dorothy has worked closely with award-winning architect and Melrose resident William Chip Sloan. And with major input from the design committee, Chip has devised major improvements to our temple while keeping the intimate charm of the synagogue intact.
We've talked about reorienting the sanctuary. We talked about creating a new workable kitchen. This actually involves demolishing this existing structure over there. We talked about adding an oneg room that worked off the main sanctuary in a flexible way. We talked about creating a new bima where the congregation faces eastward.
We do a lot of things here. Besides our services that we hold, we have our jazz concerts and our bruppers and various social events and movies that we show. So one of the things that we wanted to do with this big main space, this beautiful, as you said, intimate sanctuary, is to show its flexibility. So that's one of the exciting things about the design, is that the way we've used the bima is somewhat theatrical, because we have curtains that will pull across it, and when they pull across, it can be transformed into another venue.
The building itself is a very nice space. It was originally designed as a dance hall, music hall, dance space, and so it has a wonderful feel.
Everybody's gung-ho. There's no question about that.
This whole column of glasses were here when we bought the building and moved in the 50s, and nobody has touched these glasses. Nobody since the 1950s.
Much has changed in Melrose, indeed around the world, since Temple Beth Shalom's modest beginnings in 1940. But in many important ways, our temple remains very much the way it was way back then.
I loved it then. I love it now. I love it because of the people here. They're just wonderful. People of all ages get together and feel comfortable together.
It was always a family-centered temple. That is, if anything went wrong, everybody in the temple knew it and came to their help.
When the chips are down, if there's a problem, this is the place we come to first.
There is nobody who ever comes into our temple who doesn't remark about the family feeling that we give off.
Temple Beth Shalom, an association of families that carved out a small but important niche in Melrose to become a vital part of the community. Temple Beth Shalom, a congregation celebrating its past, but enjoying its present and striving to build a better future.